Welcome to DIY 7 Years War, a parody and a summary. We begin with War of Austrian Succession. To truly understand the underlying causes of the 7 Years' War in Europe, it begins with the death of Charles VI and his daughter, Maria Theresa of Austria, succeeding his throne. The King of Prussia, Frederick III, who later becomes known as Frederick the Great of Prussia, didn't take too kindly to her doing so. He declares war against Austria and its allies in the War of Austrian Succession, which lasts from 1740 to 1748. During this war, he captures Silesia, causing a major blow to Austria. The war later ends with the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, which allows Prussia to annex Silesia. Europe's start, with Austria wanting to take Silesia back after losing it to Prussia. France wanting to win against the Britain, and Russia wanting to conquer Eastern Prussia. The three became allies against Prussia and Britain. Frederick the Great knew the odds were against him, and in not wanting to be surrounded, he would invade Saxony. Officially starting the 7 Years' War in Europe. Britain backs Prussia because Britain thought he was the most eligible in Hanover. The war would be fought between two parties. The Convention of Westminster, which includes Britain and Prussia, and the Treaty of Versailles, 1756, not the World War II one, which consists of France, Russia, and Austria. During the time of the invasion of Saxony, Britain couldn't immediately help Prussia because Britain decided to focus on the war in the colonies. Due to this, Prussia was left alone to mainly fight against its enemies by itself. Now, Prussia actually almost collapses. In 1759, Russia invades East Prussia. And in 1758, Russia was able to capture East Prussia. The Battle of Königsdorf was a turning point for Russians and the Austrians in the Third Silesian War. On August 12, 1759, in the Battle of Königsdorf, the Prussian army was defeated. Russia failed to follow fully up. In 1760 through 1761, Russia seizes Berlin and overran Pomerania, while Austria was able to seize Saxony and Silesia back. After the serious downfalls for Prussia, Frederick III was well aware that Prussia would collapse as a country, but in some kind of miracle, Russia's ruler, Tsarina Elizabeth, passes away on January 5th, 1762, and was succeeded by her nephew, Peter III. It just so happened that Peter III looked up to Prussia, Frederick III, and signed the Treaty of St. Petersburg, which would withdraw Russia from the war. which soon followed up with the Treaty of Hamburg, which would withdraw Sweden from the war also. Spain versus Portugal. The Spanish monarch Frederick V died in 1759, being succeeded by Charles III. Charles III entered the war with France as its ally and targeted Portugal due to it being economically important to Britain. Unfortunately, Joseph I, King of Portugal, wanted to rebuild and not militarize the country, as Portugal was still recovering from the Lisbon earthquake of 1755. To avoid having major losses and casualties, Portugal negotiated and gave Spain small amounts of land. Treaties of the end in Europe. Treaty of Paris, 1763, ended the 7 Years' War in the America, signed by Great Britain and Hanover. Great Britain and Hanover on one side, and France and Portugal on the other side. This treaty forced French to give Britain all of North America to the east of Mississippi to Britain, and in return, Britain would return the West Indian Islands and seceded St. Lucia to France. Spain was able to get Havana and Manila back when seceded East and West Florida to Britain and getting Louisiana. In the Treaty of Hubertsburg, 1763, ended the 7 Years' War in Germany between Prussia and Austria. It guaranteed Prussia's spot as a major European power and Prussia's control of Silesia. Now, India started in the 7 Years' War. As the war continued on in North America and Europe, it also commenced in India, known as the Carnatic Wars. With the Mughal Empire's decline, the East India Company was fighting an economic war to monopolize the traded goods in India against French and Dutch companies. The fighting in India was mainly done in the south due to the powerful navy and military. Britain was able to seize many forts, French forts and settlements, especially after the turning point Battle of Plassey. But before that, British suffered a major hit in 1756 in Calcutta. Black Hole of Calcutta. One of the most memorable events during the Carnatic Wars in India came to be known as the Black Hole of Calcutta. It was an occurrence where many Europeans suffocated and died in a packed room on June 20, 1756, after the city was captured by Nawab Siraj al-Daular of Bengal. Calcutta was attacked by the Nawab due to the East India Company's failure to stop preparing the city as a defense in the 7 Years' War, which leads to the turning point, Battle of Plassey. The Battle of Plassey is considered a turning point in the Carnatic Wars in India. After the incident in Calcutta, Britain began to plan the retake of Calcutta and the overthrow of Nawab by sending Lieutenant Colonel Robert Clive. Mir Jafar, who was a discontented Nawab follower, secretly backed the British with a promise of his throne back. After advancing to the Bengali capital, Murshidabad, British forces were confronted by the Nawab's army at Plassey by the Birkarate River. The French and Bengali fired first and the British followed suit. Because of how close the two enemies were, and the two armies were, the British weren't able to hit the artillery of the French, but were able to do serious damage to the enemy's cavalry, forcing the Nawab to pull back under the leadership of Mir Jafar. A third of Bengali's army didn't join in with the fighting. As the battle continued, it began to look like a stalemate until it started raining. The British were prepared for this as Clive brought tarpaulins to keep the gunpowder dry, but the same can't be said for the Bengali troops. The Nawab ordered the army to charge as they thought the British would also have useless wet gunpowder. To their demise, the British didn't and opened fire into the oncoming crowd, slaughtering most of the cavalry. The British were able to kill the Nawab's commander, Mir Madan Khan, and were able to force the Nawab to withdraw as they had lost their valuable commander, which gave away to the French artillery contingent. After the British seized the French's cannon, they were able to take the Nawab over the Nawab's position, and with Mir Jafar being placed back on his throne.